first thing to recognize is that a CEO's personal and professional brand can have an enormous impact on the reputation of their organization. People genuinely care about what CEOs stand for. And I think in particular, their views on things like purpose, the strength of their views on the vision for their organization, and things like sustainability. So I think you see this. It's demonstrated by the fact that on Glassdoor, there is a separate score for CEOs that's kind of independent from their scores as a reputation, and that I think is interesting in itself. That people are going on there to see how others view a CEO. Now, I think it does. I think it does vary a little bit by industry. So, in some cases, a CEO's personal brand in some industries, a CEO's personal brand can have a bigger impact. And I'm thinking in particular the world of tech, in particular startups. The reputation of a CEO of a startup becomes, I think, intrinsically linked with their employer reputation. Our view is that people actually will be more likely to be joining the CEO than joining the organization. So I think that's really important. And I also think there are some variety. There's some changes globally. We do a lot of work in India now, and in India, the voice of the CEO is particularly important. People, a highly visible CEO can have a massive impact in that market on the reputation.
Okay, let me put this to the group. So Mark Zuckerberg. So does his personal brand influence or negate attracting talent to Facebook? What do you think?
My take, Brett, on Mark Zuckerberg in particular is that in the early days, as Tim pointed out, it was all about a cult of personality. People joined a CEO, they had a vision, there was a movement there. I think nowadays he's less influential in terms of people being attracted to Facebook, and I think it's much more about the opportunities presented to them. But when we talk about employer brands and cultures, Facebook is a fascinating case study because I think there's a lot of internal turmoil right now. There's a lot of question about the social impact of Facebook, and I think from a leadership perspective, the question is how impactful is Zuckerberg in a positive way versus a negative way?
I think, Marcus? I'd add to that. I think there are three things that the CEO could have in terms of the impact they have. They could be an inspiring figure who someone just goes, I want to work at the company that person works at because I find that person inspiring. But it could just be, I think they're a really good business person who's got a good plan for a business, and therefore that's a business I want to work at. But I think the third one is also, is that someone that I might get the opportunity to work with directly? And that becomes really important in areas like law, where suddenly who the leaders are is actually, I want to learn from that individual. But that's not going to be relevant for lots of people. You're not going to work directly with the CEO. You're not going to learn from them. It's probably going to be more about, do I want to be working at the place that they are in charge of, or do I want to have the halo of their reputation onto my reputation because I'm CEO?
Yes. Now, Mike, you talk to a lot of CEOs. What are you seeing around the Asia Pac region?
Well, I was just going to add a comment there that the personal reputation of the CEO might actually be useful in deterring the wrong people from joining the company as well. You don't want everyone to apply. Elon Musk is a highly polarizing person, and you get a fair idea whether you'd get on in his business by the way he presents himself. So I think deterring people can be as useful as encouraging them to join.
Okay, and Charlotte, what's your thoughts on this CEOs? What about your CEO? Do they attract or repel talent?
I think, to Tim's point, I think the size of the organization is super important. I think CEO's personal brand, regardless, is a massive pull factor, especially if you're trying to lure certain types of talent. It puts that company on someone's radar who they might not even considered that company, especially if it's more of a startup. They're just starting out, trying to raise that awareness. But I think especially in those kind of emerging markets, the CEO's personal brand is such an attraction for people. They can't underestimate the power of their personal brand, really.
Yes. And Emily, like in the area that you work in and support CEOs, I'm sure some of them love to get involved and tell a lot of stories and share them with the audience, and there's a lot that don't. It may be driven by industry as well. I know the finance industry were very reluctant to get on camera years ago, but they look like they're sort of opening up on that now. What's been your experience with CEOs and their personal brand? Are they interested?
I think that it's many CEOs are really interested, and more are, I think, waking up to the opportunity that is in front of them if it's something that they were closed off to before. Echoing everyone's points, I think the size of organization is a big factor. I think if you're a smaller company, maybe you even meet the CEO in your interview process. So you really get a good feeling for them then. I mean, I still meet everybody in the interview process, even if it's just a quick 15 minutes. But on the other end of the scale, I think even for the large banks, we're seeing more and more CEOs get involved in self-recorded content for internal and external purposes. And I think it's about having big messages land in a really human way. Because otherwise, I think there's a lot of change and transformation happening in companies. And I think that the CEO has an opportunity to make it relatable.
Both existing totally agree.
And adding to Emily's point, Brett, I think it goes back to this idea of authenticity. A lot of CEOs do it because they really mean it and they're engaged. Some of them do it as a box ticking exercise. So I think if you have a CEO who is truly on board with the concept of culture and employer brand, it can be incredibly powerful. But if it's someone who's just doing it because it seems like a box to tick and they say, yeah, I've done it, here's a video, not going to really move the needle. Yeah,
it probably works against them as well. Anita, you deliver CEO messages in many different formats. I've seen your podcast that you've been doing lately. Yeah. Do the CEOs want to get involved in this for their own ego, or do you think that they want to do it to show some humility and vulnerability amongst their own employees, but also the market they're trying to reach out to?
Yeah. So I think CEOs are getting more and more conscious regarding the expectations versus the reality. So I see a huge twist in this regard in the past 10 years that I think it turned from being the speaking head of the organization and being the face of the organization, and a bit of like extroversion was involved.
Yes.
It's becoming more and more conscious, like pointing and detecting touch points where they really have to get involved and where they can highlight and underline certain messages, and where there are situations when they have to push the second line in the first row in order to build up proper expectations. So I think that's what's going on, that CEOs are underlining certain messages, and they are the face of the organization and they represent the human part of the brand, but they are also managing the expectations and reality and pushing more and more the second and third row in the front line.